Hey, everybody, welcome into another edition of the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with Dr. Owen. Very excited for today's episode. I have a great friend of mine coming on. Her name is Kelly Jo. She is an amazing person, an amazing mom, just dealing with the struggle of parenting and life and coping between a full-time job and parenting and being a wife and then trying to make a side hustle happen with different forms of social media and kind of juggling all that is very challenging, which I know and Dr. D knows as well. So, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me. I've never done anything like this before, so it's pretty exciting.
Thank you so much for being brave and vulnerable and being willing to do this, because I know it's a little nerve-wracking. I still get nervous, and this is like our 75th episode. So it takes a little getting used to, because it's a different form. And anytime, like, as humans, we do something new, it could be a little nerve-wracking. So we appreciate you doing this. But the whole genesis of why Dr. D and I started this parenting was the realization that, one, there's not a ton of science-based things out there to help parents. And then two, that parenting is really hard. Full stop. We want to make shirts, but first we need somebody to sponsor the shirt. So still working on that. But we know parenting is really hard. So if we could put some information out there into the world that gives somebody like me, who's a struggling parent, who's just trying to be the best dad I could be to my two boys, some information that makes it just a little bit easier, that's what we want to do. So that's why we started the podcast. That's why we've continued to do the podcast as we try to grow this audience. So if you like what you're hearing and you want us to keep putting this information out there, please like the podcast, share the podcast, tell all your friends and family about the podcast. That way I can keep convincing Dr. Owen that this is a good use of her time. So that's the plan. Dr. Owen, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's good to see you both. Thank you for being here.
It's so great. Thank you. Hey, can we talk about ants for a second?
Yes.
Okay. So you know how you've had your fire ant situation? Was it fire ants?
Kelly Jo, I very unfortunately stepped on a fire ant hill and got 15 bites on my foot, and it swelled up. It was excruciatingly itchy for a few weeks, and thankfully, bites go away. So I overcame it. But a couple of weeks ago, I was trying not to itch the whole time.
I texted her every day. I texted her every day and just said, "Don't itch."
Yeah, 100%. You need one of those bug things that you when you get a bug bite, you suck it out immediately after it happens.
Totally. I bought all the things afterwards.
Yeah, all the things.
Now I'm ready.
Yes. It's funny how that happens. Something happens and you're like, I will never be in this situation again, unprepared.
The reason I bring it up, because I was cutting grass yesterday, and I think I must have I didn't even notice while I was doing it, right? But I must have stepped in some kind of ant pile or something, because I've got probably 10 or 15 bug bites on my ankle. So I'm in itch mode. Just tell us a little bit about you, your family, whatever you feel kind of comfortable sharing, your parenting journey.
Yeah, definitely. So I live in Oklahoma. We live on a homestead, so 40 acres of nothing but fun and work. So I am a wife, been married since 2015. We are high school sweethearts, so we have grown up together a little bit. My parenting journey started in 2017, 2018, around that time. We were married. We were, trying for kiddos, and it just wasn't working out for us. And we had the room, so we just started our fostering journey at that time. We've had some kiddos, lots of experiences. And then we ended up fostering a little boy, a 6-year-old little boy who later turned into being adoptable. And so we adopted him. And then later on, a few years later, so that was 2020, a few years later, in 2021, we got a call that there was a sibling and that she was left at the hospital. And so we had bridged with another foster family that had her at the time, and she transitioned to us to be with her sibling. And then we ended up adopting her around, her 1 year mark. And then a handful of years later, 2024, I ended up pregnant. And that was after 8 years of infertility, doctors telling me I could not have my own kids. So that was definitely a shock. But we have had all the experiences in the world, I feel like, when it comes to parenting. Me and my husband were raised completely different. And so, you work through it together when you're learning each other, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're parenting, especially when your example growing up of a parent is completely different than your spouse. Not only that, but we were young with a 6-year-old. Me and my 6-year-old, we were growing together. We were learning together to navigate all the different things. And so now we're today. I have a 12-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And we're just doing the dang thing. I am a medical mom to my youngest. She does have spina bifida. She has hydrocephalus. She has neurogenic bladder and bowels. And I'm sharing that in case anyone sees this podcast has the same, because it is a smaller community. And no spina bifida baby is usually the same as another one. And then we also deal with mental health a little bit with my oldest, just from his experiences in life. And so we just navigate that. He has ADHD and he has ODD that we have dealt with for a handful of years, that we are still to this day adjusting and navigating to. So that's just a little bit about my parenting timeline in a nutshell.
That's amazing. I think it's so beautiful that you were able to reconnect the siblings.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was definitely an adventure. We never planned on adopting in the first place. It was just like, we have the means, we have the room, why not? We love little kids, why don't we just spread our love? And then it turned into adoption, and then it turned into, finding out that there's another sibling. And then we went from 1 kid to 2 kids, and then 2 kids to 3 kids. So if you think about it, we've went from 2020 to 2024, 0 to 3 kids.
You're like a super mom, Kelly. That's amazing.
Oh,
totally.
Far from it. I lean on my support group. That's one of the reasons why I joined TikTok, is because there wasn't a lot of medical moms around me that was dealing with the same situation. And not only that, but I'm 29. There's not a ton of 29s in my area that has 12-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So, there was a disconnect of, what I wanted in my community, and I wanted to be uplifted, because some days are hard. Some people that are closest to my circle, they know how many appointments I go to a week. They see the struggle of me dealing with work and everything like that. So, that is part of the reason why I branched out to TikTok, because I did want to create a positive, supportive environment. And I did want to get away from the it's hard all the time type mindset.
I just love the whole hey, we have room, which is because you could find a lot of excuses to not help, right? And you were just hey, and your husband, you're hey, we have the means, we have the room. Let's foster. Let's do this thing.
And we have the love in our hearts, which is amazing.
Yeah. I'm a big fan, Kelly. You already know this.
I'm a big fan of you. You're pretty awesome yourself. You have definitely played a part single-handedly in the positive mindset, encouragement. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, you're welcome. So our podcast works kind of like this. I just want to open the floor up to you to ask any questions of Dr. D that you might have, and she'll give her amazing wisdom that she has. And hopefully it helps you a lot, and it helps me a lot, because every single podcast I learn something. That's why I do this. It's just so I can learn. And then hopefully it also helps our audience out a lot too, because I bet you there's people out here that are listening, even though your situation is very unique, that are dealing with similar things. So
Yeah, of course. No, I'm so glad to be here. I do have some questions. I'm going to look at my notes, just a few, just to make sure that my thought process is on the right track. So, my first question is I would kind of like some insight on, do you think that parenting style has to adjust based on the kid? Because I have three different kiddos, three different personalities, different experiences in life being adopted, one having, multiple medical needs. Um, do you think that that's a possibility? Do you think it's effective? And what are some tips on that to where you're still being the best parent you can be for each child?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. I'm going to start with the last part, actually. So, what are some tips to be the best parent to each child? The first thing I would think about are your core parenting values. What matters to you most as a parent? So, my answer to your question, kind of broadly, is yes, you're going to do some adapting of style while keeping your core values. So, what matters most to you? What do you care about? How do you want to show up for your kids? And what do parenting is a relationship. Like, what do you want to bring to the relationship? And what do you want them to get from the relationship? So, earlier you said love. So, one of your core parenting values, I'm guessing, is love. You want your kids to feel loved. And that might look different for different kids, right? Some kids that might look like a lot of hands-on physical affection. For other kids, that might look like a lot of affirmation and positive feedback and verbal affection. For other kids, that might just be time physically present with them and spending time together doing things they want to do. And so, as far as style goes, it's about adapting to kind of using trial and error, figuring out what resonates with your child, and then going from the core value. So if you want to express love, how does it seem like my child is getting the experience of love? Or sometimes they'll just tell you, I don't like it when you touch me. Cool. Thanks for letting me know that. Right. Or, you might start with, does this feel, giving them a little back rub at bedtime. Does this feel good? And some kids, no, I don't. Okay. How about a story? How about just me sitting here with you, right? Just to feel comfortable and sharing space. So the value is the core. So if you have a value, you said you're homesteaders and you work on your land and you've got 40 acres, I'm guessing there is some value around participation and taking an active role in doing work. And so figuring out how each one can participate and do work in a way that makes sense. And so how you might just assign a list of chores and they might just be a go-getter and go for it. And another one, you might have to use a lot of what Jake and I talked about last episode, when then. So when you finish doing X, Y, and Z, then we get to play, ABC. And so using whatever kinds of things that help with motivating them, but again, coming back to your values. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. That does resonate with me for sure, because I feel like I am a perfect example of having to show up a little bit differently per child.
Yeah.
And, it's hard when, you want to be, the idea of being a great mom is this one thing, but then in your day-to-day life, it just doesn't work out that way. And you're not 100% every day.
Totally. So you mentioned like your oldest has ODD, right? So when he's highly activated, being present for him is probably going to be being absent, actually. So, right. So like giving space and saying, I'm going to give you a little space right now so you can regulate. And, he might be a kid who needs help with co-regulation, or he might be a kid who just needs you out of there because his system's on hot and he needs to cool down. So it's like, I'm going to give you some space to cool down. I'm here for you. I'm going to come check in 10 minutes. Right. So you're keeping the connection. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, yes, 100%. Emotions are very hard for him. And registering what emotion he is feeling at that time is still very much a struggle years later.
Yeah. So when he's in that activated state, you and he might just think of it as like high, right? Or hot. And then it's like, okay, we don't need to necessarily say what that is right now. We just know that is. And then we can kind of get to a cooler place, and then we can maybe talk about the emotion or what set it off, right? But in that state, it's like, we just got to give you your space to regulate because you're dysregulated. And if he's the kind of kid who can't regulate on his own, but does respond really well to like a bear hug in that moment. And again, every kid is different. This is where the trial and error kind of comes in. But if he responds really well to a bear hug, then you're going to kind of say, okay, I can see this. You're feeling really hot. Let me give you a bear hug. Let's just both breathe, stand here until it's cooler. Okay. And then kind of go from there.
Dr. D, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So like you were basically talking about like, okay, identifying your core value, like your core, like maybe you would call it almost like a mission statement for a business, right? Like your core values as a parent, right? So here's my core value. But then each kid's a little bit different and might receive love a little bit different, right? So you have your core value, but maybe each kid, you don't change the core value, but you change the action for the kid. Like this kid likes a scratch bag, this kid likes quality time, but the core value never changes, right?
Exactly. And part of what makes this strategy helpful of identifying your core values is then throughout parenting, and Kelly Jo, you were saying you have hard days, you have bad days, just kind of coming back and being like, okay, but am I still on track with my values? Like, ooh, that interaction felt really crummy. I know why that felt crummy. That did not feel consistent with my values. Or that interaction felt crummy, but I was still in my values, right? I was still being loving, and we had, a disagreement. We had an argument. We had, a crummy moment, but nothing that happened in that moment conveyed to my child that I wasn't loving them, right? And so that's where you can kind of it's almost like your like cornerstone, right? You can kind of keep using it to help keep you grounded and knowing that you're in your parenting values as you're adjusting your actions, behaviors, and words.
What if there's somebody out there, because I'm thinking through like, what are my parenting values, which is probably not a great like thought process right now. But like, if there's a parent out there like me that's like, well, like what thought process should I have when I'm trying to maybe I don't have my parenting values identified or written down or like in my memory or heart. Like, what is that? Like, is there like a process that you would undertake with your partner, or if you have older kids, maybe an older kid, to like identify your family values if somebody in the audience is saying, I don't have that yet?
So let me encourage you to start on your own, right? And so coming up with your personal values, if there is another parent that you're parenting with, then connecting with them if they're willing to kind of identify theirs and talking it through, seeing the overlap, seeing the inevitable differences that you probably will have. A great way to do this is, in this day and age of technology, if you Google personal values or parenting values, you're going to get lists of adjectives that are values that different people have. And no values are right or wrong. It's just what matters to you, right? And so that's another important thing to realize, that you might see something on that list and think like, oh, am I supposed to? No. If it's your value, then yes. If it's not, we are most connected with ourselves when we're living in accordance with our values as humans. So I would say, Google it up, make a little list. Do your top 5 or top 10. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't get in the weeds. Don't have 80 values. Do your top key ones. And then you can just keep coming back to those and making sure that whatever you're doing in your day-to-day with your kids is as consistent as possible with your parenting values. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect.
It'd be very hard to maintain 80 core values. That's
right.
The whole purpose of a core value. It's very small, right? Kelly, so one thing that we had, we had this really amazing guy on, and Dr. D even shared this as well, that this rule, his name's Mike on Parenting, and his rule is like, so I'll encourage you with this, and then I know you might have another question, but 80-20, the 80-20 rule, okay? So like us as parents, right, and our kids are not going to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just not possible. We're human, right?
I'm not either.
Yeah, exactly. So like us as parents and our kiddos, like if we expect our kids to be a perfect 100% of the time, well, that's going to leave us disappointed because they're kids and they're humans, right? And as parents,
Right.
if we expect ourselves to be perfect 100% of the time, we're going to feel like crummy parents, right? So like, and Dr. D, correct me if I'm not saying this like as well as he does because he's amazing. But like it's this thing where if we have the expectation where our kids are going to make mistakes at least 20% of the time, it helps us react better to those mistakes because we know our kids are going to make mistakes. So if our expectation is our kids and us as parents are going to be doing our values and our kids are going to be behaving properly or whatever 80% of the time and not 100% of the time, it helps us in those bad moments to react a little better because we have the expectation that our kids are going to make mistakes and we are going to make mistakes too. Right? Dr. D, did I do that okay?
Great. That was a great explanation.
Yeah. So like when you're in that moment, you're tired, you're struggling, and you don't handle the situation to your values, or you just don't handle it well, give yourself a little bit of slack to say, I'm not perfect. My kid's not perfect. Right. I'm gonna struggle at least 20% of the time. Me, it's more like 80% of this, like backwards. But like to give yourself some grace, like, hey, look, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying, and every once in a while, there's going to be a mistake by me or the kiddos. So just something to think about as far as encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also encourage you to say that to your kids. I don't expect it to be perfect because them hearing that and like telling myself that, it makes a difference, especially with my kiddos. Like I will say that, because you never know what's fully going on in their head.
Yeah.
Especially like with my son, he's getting older. We're transitioning to more responsible, for so many, handful of years, we were saying, you be a kid. That is your one job. You have never got to be a kid. Let's focus on you being a kid. Well, now that he's 12, we're transitioning to, okay, you do have to prepare to have some responsibilities. And so they can get in their head a lot from what I've experienced personally. And I feel like saying that, hey, I don't expect this to be perfect, but I do expect you to try. I think that makes a difference to say to them as well, because we as parents sometimes are saying all these things to ourselves and being mindful of them, but they're learning too. And so when we can say that stuff to them as kids too, I think that makes a difference.
I agree. That's a good point.
Absolutely.
Kelly, did you have another question?
Yes. So it kind of goes along with therapy in general. So my son has been in therapy for a handful of years. My daughter, my 4-year-old, she is not currently in therapy, but she does have some of the same past experience as my son, foster care, adoption. And even though she was way younger and didn't get as many probably, experiences as my son did, what things should I be looking for to when maybe I need to bridge that resource? Or is there a general thought that maybe therapy or having that third party safe area is important to every kid?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think in terms of, is it important for like it's wonderful to be able to have that resource for kids. Sometimes resources are nice and sometimes resources are necessary. And so I would be thinking, especially hearing what you said earlier with different appointments and just working and momming and all the other things, also be mindful of like how thin you and your kids are getting stretched, right? So the way I like to think about it is if there is something that is either negatively impacting your child's functioning so that they are not able to function as well as they could in their lives. And I'm not talking perfectly. I'm just talking like kind of average functioning in their lives. So they are so anxious that they can't get to school or they're getting to school late frequently. That would be a point where they're not functioning as they are intended to function. And so that would be a sign that, ooh, we need more help. Or if they are functioning, but they're enduring a lot of distress. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of low mood, a lot of physical discomfort that's coming from emotional pain, right? Like headaches or stomach aches you rule out the physical by going to the pediatrician, and then we know that's probably an emotional root to that. Those are the kinds of reasons that I think are really important to then seek additional help. But if your child is functioning generally pretty well and not showing signs of distress, if you have the bandwidth and the energy and all of that, sure, it's a lovely resource to offer. But there are also a lot of other ways to get that without having another appointment a week. So, for example, there are a number of children's books for kids that you could be reading that are just kind of explaining concepts that are helpful that they would probably be getting from therapy. Jake knows, I have written 6 children's books, and I wrote them because it's like there's a lot of messaging that I do in my sessions with my children patients that every kid would benefit from knowing, and I've had
Right.
kids in sessions say, why don't they teach us this at school? My friends need to know this. And I'm like, amen. I agree. And so that was sort of where that came from. So seeking out other resources like activities that make them feel good. If they're athletic, it could be a sporting endeavor. If they're creative, it could be an artistic endeavor. But doing things that help them feel good about themselves, that help them function as well as they can. And if you're not seeing signs that they are either having a hard time doing the things that you would be expecting, or any signals that they're doing it with a high level of distress, and they're probably going to tell you, right? Like, I feel scared. I don't want to do this. I have a tummy ache. Some of those things you can just talk through it with them. But if that's not really improving, or you're seeing more and more discomfort or distress or physical distress that's not connected to a physical reason, that's when I would really be seeking out a therapist. And different kids respond differently, right? So some kids love having therapy, and it really is that space to talk to an unbiased adult who is just there to be able to help and be supportive and be caring. And some kids really don't want to open up in that space. And that's another thing to consider is like, I never want to see a kid who's seeing therapy as a bad thing and
Right.
unhelpful repeatedly, because I know I can be helpful, but there has to be a level of willingness. And I would rather a family kind of go and come back in a few years when that kid maybe is more open to it and we can create that connection and do the work, rather than have them feel like, I don't want to be here, I'm miserable, I'm shut down. It's like, then they're going to be thinking therapy doesn't work. And I don't want them thinking that in their mind. So it's also a little bit
Right.
about just kind of like seeing what your kid likes and wants to do and how responsive they are. That's a third piece of it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I get
absolutely.
in my head about, well, what if, they start asking, well, why do they have these appointments and I don't? Or why do they get to go and I don't? But I also feel like throughout the years, having therapy with my son has better prepared me for, raising my others, And so I implement
Totally.
things earlier on that has helped him.
Right.
And, they get the tools a little bit sooner than it was, it took a little bit before he did.
Exactly. That's exactly true. And you could always consider, sometimes what a sibling might be attracted to about therapy is just that attention piece, which obviously it is, right? It's really a high level of attention. You could always consider figuring out how to carve out that time block for your other child. And it might be doing different things than what your oldest one might be doing in therapy, but just being able to say, here, we do therapy for a half hour or 45 minutes a week, so we're going to find 45 minutes where you and I can go do X. And just being able to give that time and attention, that also sometimes is the solve for it, to be totally honest.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. Thank you for that.
Cool. My pleasure.
Dr. D is the absolute best. So yeah, I think therapy is like about, because I've been in therapy and my kids have as well. But it's like about getting tools for both the parent and the kid. That's why I think it's so useful. I will say, Kelly, and Dr. D might be surprised by this because we haven't talked about this in a while. But one thing we've talked about in the past is we will send you a book, one of Dr. D's books. So go pick one out. Go to her website and just text in the group text which one that you would like. And we will send you it as a thank you for coming on the podcast.
That's so nice. Thank you guys. I'm excited.
It's a really good tool. So that's
my
actually
kiddos love books.
And that's how we all started this podcast. Like one of my 9-year-old was struggling with his emotions, especially around anger and a little bit about anxiety as well. Mm-hmm. And Sarah just somehow stumbled on Dr. D's books on Amazon. It was recommended and we bought 6 of them and we really loved them. And I wanted to reach out to encourage Dr. D about how awesome she was. And then we became friends and now we're doing this podcast. So
see, that's the type of person you are. You are very encouraging.
Yeah, I had to beg for a while, but it worked out.
But
not
besides
true
that,
at all. That is not true at all, Jake.
Dr. D's the star. Hey, Dr. D, are you ready for the last word?
Sure. So to kind of summarize and synthesize what we talked about today, I really think an important theme is that different kids are different and have different needs. And whether that is for parenting or whether that means for different resources like getting therapy. And so part of it is just really trying to tune into your kid and figuring out what that may be. So if your child is showing any significant signs of distress in terms of differences in mood or not being able to kind of show up as you would expect for their lives, that would be a good sign that they might be ready for some therapy, or at least first step is to reach out to the pediatrician, talk about it, and see what resources are available. And when it comes to parenting, just recognizing that if you parent from your core values, then you are parenting from a place that's consistent with what matters to you. That might look different for different kids. And the best way I can explain it is it's probably going to be a little bit of trial and error. So if you approach your child in one way and it's just not working, you're not being able to convey what you're trying to convey, or you're not working together as a parent-child team, then think about other ways you might go about that and then try those out. Really being able to recognize that when you parent from a place that's your values, you are being true to you and your kids are getting that from you. And that works really well in the long term for parents and kids. And if you want to figure out how to kind of determine what your parenting values are, just take some time, look up parenting values or personal values on Google, sit with the list of adjectives and see which ones rise to the top. And that's a good gauge of what your top values or your core values are. And then if you have another parent in the picture, you can always communicate about those and try to find that overlap for where you want to be parenting from. But if you do want additional resources, you can always go to my website, drdanielaowen.com, and all of my books are up there. And of course, I don't mean to steal your thunder, Jake, but subscribe to our podcast, share with other people, follow me on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook. Follow Jake and Speedster Squad on YouTube and TikTok. He just started on TikTok, and just connect up with us so that you can get more valuable resources to help you with this difficult parenting journey that we're all on together.
Dr. D, I feel like you should start doing the end of it because you did that 100 times better than I could ever do it. You just start handling. You could just handling the. You could just start handling the end of it. Do all the things that Dr. D said, and go buy her books. Go buy her books because they're really awesome. Kelly,
thank you, Kelly.
I appreciate you doing this so much. This was a fantastic episode. I knew you would be fantastic, and you were.
Thanks.
You have such a great personality. You're a great person and a great mom. So thank you for doing this. And if you got something out of this, I'll just say one more time, please go find our stuff. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. It's on YouTube. You can find clips on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all over the place. We want to keep putting this content out there because we enjoy creating it. And we're hoping you're getting something out of it. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. It really helps us out and lets others discover the show.